Hi, I'm Min Kobayashi, and today I'm going to be doing my November wrap-up. This was actually a really good reading month. It's the first in a while. I've been really discouraged lately and just very stressed. I got my 4th diagnosis since June, and apparently now I have costochondritis, which means that the costal things that connect my ribs and my sternum are apparently inflamed all the time, which makes me hard to breathe. So hopefully they actually got my diagnosis right now and I will get better soon. That's the hope. If you've been around for a while, you probably know that I'm quite harsh in my rating, but I got 3 2 stars, 3 3 stars, 2 4 stars, and 4 5 stars, which is incredible because I barely ever rate anything 5 stars. Although I did have 3 rereads, so that might be a contributing factor. And then I had 5 physical and 7 audiobooks, and I had 3 poems, 2 middle grade urban fantasy, 1 YA contemporary, 3 historical fiction, 2 are YA and 1 is adult, and 2 sci-fi and 1 classic. So very different in genre. I like to read very broadly as much as I can. In Flanders Fields by John McCrae. John McCrae is a very well-known and revered Canadian author who was a World War I veteran, and he wrote very potently about war and what it felt like, and In Flanders Fields is a poem that has always grasped my heart very, very deeply. I've reread it I think 3 times already this year. It always haunts me very deeply, especially around Remembrance Day. And I give it 5 stars because there is no other rating I could give it. My second poem that I read was Edward Thomas's poems. The cherry trees bend over and are shedding on the old road where all that past are dead, their petals strewing the grass as for a wedding, this early May morn when there is none to wed. Which is just heart-wrenching. Sea of Monsters, which is my October book for Read DA, Demigods Anonymous, which I host along with Kenzie and Margaret. I actually was really surprised because it has always been my least favorite, but this time I actually enjoyed it a lot more and saw a lot more themes of family and different things that I hadn't caught before, and I'll leave the live show linked up there. And I gave Sea of Monsters 3 stars. 3 stars to Francis Ledwin's selected poems as well from here. I did not find his as resonated, but I did find them still very powerful, even though they weren't ones that hit me as much as some of the other poetry in there. The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Society. It actually was very jarring to read it at first because I'd watched the movie twice prior to reading the book, and I didn't expect it to be epistolary. I expected it started out and it was an audiobook, and I thought that it was just the first introductory, and then it never stopped. And I haven't read that many epistolary novels. I've read Windy Poplars by Lucy Montgomery. That's the only one I can think offhand that is in that faction. But it was very good. The characterization of the characters were very, very good. They have very unique personalities, and even though many of the characters had been combined in the movie, I was able to see how unique they were and the different tastes, and many of them only appear for 1 letter, but their writing style is unique, and the characters and the island is beautiful. The island is described as a place where a writer could never focus, and as someone who writes, that definitely resonates with me. However, I only gave it 2 stars because I don't think it would be one that I would reread. To All the Boys I Loved Before by Jenny Han. This would be a contemporary YA book that also became a Netflix movie this summer. I actually enjoyed the YA adaptation. I tend to actually enjoy more trashy YA movies and TV shows than I actually do books, and I found that actually getting into their heads and getting to read about them made me dislike them a lot more. And I'm not a YA contemporary person, I will give that. I'm not a very much contemporary person at all, so that might have been part of it, but I was expecting to like it a little bit more than I did. I did give it 2 stars because I do think that it had some redeeming factors, but it was definitely a very low 2 star. I have a 5 star, which is Waking Gods by Sylvain Neuvel. This is a Canadian author who writes adult sci-fi, and this was the 2nd book in the Themis Files. I adored it. I love it so much. It is such a strong book, and it has such incredible world building, and it's given in file format, so to make that world building and character so unique is incredible. Focuses on Rose Franklin, a girl who discovered a giant when she was a girl and is now the researcher. And I won't give the spoilers going into the second book, but that is the first time. It is not one for the lighthearted, with torture and a million upon millions death, those of statistics and those of personal tragedies. It is a book I adored. I love the questions of what made one human, from Rose's quandaries to those of DNA. What is good, what is evil, what is right, and what is necessary. It's splendid, and it is a book that, though I've read on audiobook, I can't wait to read in physical format. Every time I go into chapters, I just kind of look at it and dream of owning it, and the audiobook is very splendid. I would recommend highly. Anne of Avonlea is an incredible book. It is another second book in a series that I have always liked the least. However, rereading it 10 years later, I adored it. The quiet mythology, the characters. Lucy Maud Montgomery has a way to capture the souls and emotions so deeply, and she's a woman who had so much hurt in her life yet brought so much joy, and the idea of transitions in this book really stuck with me because as a person who's going through a lot of transitions right now, it really resonated with me. And even I read a passage to my friend who it is about moving on and we're going different paths next year. And for me, it's a very hard thing to process that I won't be near her, and just reading the passage to her just was very powerful for me. And when you're able to do that, that's what books are supposed to be. They're supposed to be able to capture that emotion. And it's one that both of us could capture a lot. So I really appreciated this book so much more, and I gave it 5 stars, which I think before it only had 2, so this has definitely risen in my books. Then 2, Incarceron. I did this from Tome Topple, so I actually did a Tome Topple book. This is amazing. This is a book that has been on my shelf forever, and I finally got to it. It was actually way better than I expected. I had very low expectations because I just began to start to kind of hate it on my shelf, and it wasn't necessarily amazing. It did have very good world building. It follows the steampunk book world, and I haven't had very good luck with steampunk. I read Scott Westerfield's Leviathan and I could barely swallow it, and this, at first, I was feeling the same way, but I do really feel like it was a very interesting world, a world where they just decided that they were going to stop developing, and they kind of regressed into the time where they got us stuck in like the 1700s-ish. Like, it's just a kind of weird era because they had progressed technology and now they don't, and it's very interesting. But pretty much it follows Finn, who is in a jail where all the criminals were put into the jail to live, and they've hoped that one day it would become a paradise, and then that's not what it is. It's terrible, and they're stuck in it forever, and the children upon children just live in this jail. And then Claudia, who's in arranged marriage and the daughter of the warden of the jail, and she has to marry the prince, and she's kind of believing that her first fiancé was murdered. And it's very interesting. I admit that it has a very ominous feel, and my major issue was that it was sometimes overly complicated for no reason, and that the characterization of the characters were not always even. I sometimes feel like they were characterized one way, and then a moment again they were in a different way, and it just made me very frustrated that I didn't feel like I got a good grasp of who they were. In the end, I decided to give it 2 stars. I give 4 stars to The Titan's Curse by Rick Riordan. I did this as my November read for Demigods Anonymous as well. There is a live show for this as well. I am not in it because I was very sick the day that it was filmed as an audiobook at the time, and it was a painful experience, probably because I read it 3 or 4 times prior as a physical book, and just some of the characterization of the characters through the audiobook was painful for me to listen to. Yeah, I had very different feelings about it in some ways. It is still the book that I adore a lot because it is the book where you up the ante in the world, and it just becomes, there's 2 deaths after being no deaths in the prior book. Percy Jackson as a series follows a boy who's 12. At this point he's 14. He finds out that he is the son of a Greek god, and he has to go on quests, and that he wasn't supposed to be born because his father agreed to never have children again because World Wars caused because of them. So he is kind of going to signal the end of the world, which is scary. The Friday before winter break, my mother packed me an overnight bag and a few deadly weapons and took me to a new boarding school. The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein. I do not have words to describe it. There is no way I could describe this one book in as long as I have in this video. I'm definitely going to be doing a review on it. It is outstanding. I gave it 5 stars. I adored everything about it. I love Kiersten White's writing. It is gorgeous. It is simplistic. I don't know if it's simplistic. It's not overly flowy, but it is beautiful. And even like, she caught me with the dedication and she caught me with the author's notes. So like, that's how amazing it was. And another one is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. I gave it 2 stars, not because it was horrid or anything like that. It is a historical fiction in the 18th century who follows this guy named Monty Montague. He is going on a continental, so Europe, tour with his best friend Percy, who he might have more than a friendship with, and his sister Felicity and this overbearing man. Lots of things ensue, craziness, and I have interesting thoughts about it. I will probably do a review about it as well, especially character driven. If you don't like unlikable main characters, do not read this book. Highly recommended. That would be my wrap up for November. Tell me which book you enjoyed the most, which book I should have liked more or least, or what your thoughts were on the books I read. You know, whatever you want to talk about. I just like comments. Come on. I love interaction. It makes me happy. It warms my soul. Anyways, feel free to subscribe, comment, like, find me on social media. You can stalk me. It's fun. Anyways, have a great time reading and writing, and Christmas time!